Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm bringing you a new episode in the story of Ly Hoai Ca and Hùng, two resilient souls who keep searching for happiness, no matter how many storms life throws their way. After countless hardships and long days spent caring for her mother and little Tony, Hoai Ca has finally found a new beginning. Meanwhile, Hùng, the quiet yet deeply responsible man, has made an important decision to buy another piece of land and build a home that truly belongs to her. This episode will take us along that journey, a journey of faith, perseverance, and silent sacrifice. Will this new house truly become the peaceful haven that Hoai Ca has always dreamed of? And behind Hung's decision, is there something more he has yet to reveal? Stay tuned to find out how the story unfolds, and don't forget to leave a comment to show your support for Hoai Ca and Hùng. Early in the morning, gentle sunlight filtered through the rows of erica palms by the gate, glimmering on the lingering drops of dew after the fierce storm had passed. The air was fresh, carrying the faint scent of wet soil and damp leaves, that familiar fragrance of the countryside after the rain, pure, but laced with quiet hardship. The red dirt road running through the village was still soaked, marked by the tracks of an ox cart that had just rolled by, while a few tiny chicks scurried about, dodging puddles along the way. Inside a small house nestled beside a bamboo grove, Hoai Ca had already been awake since dawn. She tied up her hair neatly, rolled up her sleeves, and bent over the vegetable beds to check which plants had survived the flood. The young morning glories were still pushing through, their pale green leaves fragile yet resilient, just like the woman who tended them. She exhaled softly, equal parts weary and relieved, her sunburnt hands gently patting soil around each stem. From inside the house, Tony had just woken up. The little boy rubbed his eyes, hugged his worn-out teddy bear, and toddled out to the porch, his bare feet covered in dust. Seeing his mother busy at work, he grinned brightly. "Mom, can I help you water the veggies?" Hoai Ca turned to him, her eyes full of affection. "Of course you can, but put your boots on, the ground's still slippery." Tony nodded eagerly and ran inside to fetch his tiny rubber boots, humming a cheerful tune as he went. Their laughter and chatter mingled with the soft morning mist and the chirping of sparrows on the roof. The peaceful scene felt as if the storm had never happened, only the quiet simplicity of life remained, where love was strong enough to bring back the light after the darkness. Meanwhile, miles away from that tranquil village, Hùng was jogging around the training yard of his unit. The mountain air was crisp and cold, his breath turned to faint mist with every exhale. Sweat soaked through his workout shirt, but his thoughts were far away, with the woman he quietly loved and the child he had come to think of as his own. The recent storm had cost him several sleepless nights. He worried about Hoai Ca, about her small clay-walled house, and whether it could withstand the wind and rain. Since hearing that part of the roof had blown off, his determination had only grown stronger. He would buy her a piece of solid land and build her a real home, one that wouldn't leak or crumble every time a storm came. He pulled out his phone and dialed Man, an old friend from the commune whom he'd asked to look for land. His steady voice came through between breaths. "Hey, about that land I asked you to check near Hoai Ca's place, any luck yet?" On the other end, Man sounded upbeat. "Yes, I found one. Around 70 square meters, 2 road fronts, residential land so you can build easily. The owner's nice too, asking for about 50 million. Hùng stopped mid-run. He stood still for a moment, watching the sun rise over the distant hills. Sweat trickled down his neck, and the morning wind brushed through his damp hair, yet warmth flooded his chest. "All right then, set up a meeting," he said firmly. "I'll head back now and get it done." He hung up and stood quietly for a few seconds. In the pale morning light, his shadow stretched long across the wet ground. Hung clenched his fists slightly, determination gleaming in his eyes as if all fatigue, distance, and hesitation of the past had melted away. Somewhere, carried faintly by the wind through the trees, he thought he heard Hoài Ca's laughter, gentle, pure, and so familiar that his heart ached just a little. Just a few hours later, Hung's car left the town behind, rolling slowly along the village road still glistening with puddles after the storm. On both sides, the fields stretched wide, heavy with the scent of damp earth. A few farmers were clearing the canal banks, their hoes striking the soil in steady rhythm beneath the lingering morning mist. The weak sunlight shimmered on the wet path, reflecting the tall erica trees whose shadows stretched across the rice paddies. At the entrance to the hamlet, he stopped the car. Ahead stood a man in his 40s, lean, kind-faced, waiting by the edge of a garden. Seeing the car approach, the man stepped forward and greeted him warmly. "You must be Mr. Hung? I'm the owner of the land you asked about. It's right here, please, come take a look." Hung nodded, shook his hand gently, and followed him in. The narrow concrete path leading into the garden was smooth and clean, flanked by low brick fences, clusters of banana trees, and a few tall ericas swaying their broad green leaves. The air smelled faintly of young corn and pomelo leaves. Birds chirped overhead, making the morning feel even fresher. As they walked, the owner spoke in his calm, rustic tone. "My plot is over 70 square meters, both sides facing the road. Electricity and water are already connected. I once planned to build another house here, but my kids all work far away. Leaving it empty seems a waste, so I figured I'd sell it to someone who really needs it." Hung stayed quiet, walking a slow circle around the plot. He crouched down, scooped up a handful of soil, squeezed it lightly between his fingers, then lifted his gaze to take in the view. The corn rows were lush and green, their tassels swaying gently. In the corner stood a row of old pomelo trees heavy with fruit, their fragrance drifting softly through the air. The ground was high and level, and beyond it stretched open fields. A faint smile touched his lips as he spoke, his voice calm and steady. "It's beautiful. Just need to raise the foundation by about a meter, and you could build right away. Back against the hill, open fields in front, morning sun, cool afternoon shade. Perfect spot for a home." The owner nodded, his eyes bright with warmth. "I'll let it go for 50 million. The paperwork's clean, everything's in order. I only hope it goes to someone who really needs it, not a broker." Without hesitation, Hung gave one last look around and said firmly, "Yes, this is the one. Let's take care of the paperwork properly." The man smiled, gentle as the first morning light. "If you've got time, let's head to the village chief's house now. He lives nearby, we can get it done quickly." They left the garden together, the car rolling slowly along the winding concrete path between the fields. Wild grass swayed in the breeze, and the clear blue sky reflected in the shallow puddles left behind by the rain. The village chief's house sat atop a small slope, its yard blooming with bright moss rose flowers. The elderly chief, a kind man in his 60s, greeted them cheerfully and invited them in. Papers were laid out on the old wooden table, neat handwriting filling each line. Outside, the wind rustled through the bamboo grove, mingling the scent of wood smoke with the faint aroma of pomelo blossoms drifting on the morning air. In that quiet moment, Hung glanced out the open window. The sunlight poured across the golden earth, and a deep calm settled in his heart, a feeling that everything was finally falling into place, simple, steady, and sincere. At the village chief's small house, the atmosphere was both formal and warm. The house sat on a gentle hillside, its mossy-tiled roof weathered by time. In front bloomed a trellis of 10 o'clock flowers, their faint fragrance drifting in the breeze. Inside the living room, An old wooden table gleamed with a fresh polish. Neatly placed upon it were several clean white sheets of paper, beside a small bottle of purple ink and the fountain pen the chief often used to write documents for the villagers. Sunlight streamed through the open window, casting soft golden streaks across the tabletop. Hung and the landowner sat across from each other, their faces serious yet cordial. They both leaned forward, checking the land map carefully, every number and note, area, plot number, boundaries by the road and the fields. Each detail was verified with care by the village chief, his handwriting neat and deliberate, much like the man himself, who had spent his life tied to the village soil. On the table, a cup of hot tea gave off fragrant steam. The quiet sound of pens scratching against paper blended with the rustle of wind through the bamboo outside. As he wrote, the chief spoke slowly, his voice calm and steady. This land is clear, no disputes, no mortgages. Both parties agree, so I'll certify it properly to avoid any issues later. Hung nodded, eyes filled with quiet resolve. To him, this wasn't just a transaction, it was the foundation of something greater, a new beginning for Hoài Ca and the little boy he loved like his own. Just as the chief finished writing the confirmation, Hoài Ca, whom Hung had entrusted to hold the deed, spoke softly but firmly. Uncle, may I add one note, please? When the ownership papers are transferred, I'd like for him to be present and sign as a witness. I want everything to be clear. It'll make things easier in the future. The chief looked up and smiled kindly. Of course. I'll include that. It's always best to keep things transparent. With proper papers, no one can question anything. The landowner nodded in agreement, then signed his section of the contract. When it came to Hung's turn, he took a deep breath before picking up the pen. His handwriting was firm and bold, yet his eyes softened, carrying a quiet emotion that words couldn't express. When he was done, he opened his wallet, took out the prepared bundle of cash, and placed it gently on the table. Here's the full 50 million as agreed. Thank you both for your trust. The village chief took the papers, blew softly on the still wet ink until it dried, then folded them neatly into an envelope. All done. From now on, this land officially belongs to Miss Hoài Ca. I hope you all live peacefully and happily. If anything comes up, just let me know. Hung bowed in gratitude, taking the envelope and holding the contract tightly in his hands, the faint scent of fresh ink still lingering. The document was small, yet it felt heavy in his heart, not because of the money, but because of its meaning. It represented a new piece of land, a new beginning, a place where he hoped Hoài Ca and Tony could finally live in peace and warmth, without fear of the next storm. Stepping out of the small house, the sun was already high. The scent of young rice drifted from the nearby fields, mingling with the fresh smell of rain-soaked earth. Hung stood still for a moment, gazing into the distance, toward the winding road that led back to the little village. On the way back, the afternoon sun began to fade gently, slipping through the areca palms and rustling bamboo along the road. Golden rays stretched across the damp dirt path, still glistening after the rain. The slow turning of the motorbike wheels stirred up the earthy scent of mud and wet grass, that familiar fragrance of the countryside that always seemed to calm Hung's heart after a long day. In the distance, children's laughter echoed faintly from the village, a dog barked, then fell silent into the quiet of dusk. As he rode, Hung reached into the chest pocket of his shirt, where a freshly folded document rested, still carrying the faint scent of ink. It was just a small piece of paper, but to him, it held the weight of hope, the promise of a new life for Hoài Ca and her child, a place of safety and peace amid all the storms life might bring. When he turned the corner leading into the hamlet, he caught sight of a familiar figure. Hoài Ca was walking slowly, balancing two heavy baskets of beans across her shoulders. Her petite frame leaned slightly under the weight, but her steps were steady and sure. Sweat darkened her blouse, the fabric clinging lightly to her back. A few loose strands of hair stuck to her cheek, catching the last of the golden light. The setting sun brushed her sun-kissed face, softening her smile when she looked up, a smile both gentle and radiant. Seeing Hung stop by the roadside, she smiled, surprise and warmth glimmering in her eyes. "You're back already, Mr. Hung? Why didn't you rest at the station a bit longer?" He parked the bike, removed his helmet, his hair damp with sweat, but his smile was calm and kind. "I had something important to do. Anne, I came to tell you some good news." She tilted her head, still holding the carrying pole, her expression curious but cautious. He began explaining slowly how he'd asked someone to look for land, how he rushed back this morning to finalize the purchase. It had all happened so quickly that even he found it hard to believe. His tone was quiet and steady, but each word carried a quiet excitement beneath it. Hoài Ca froze mid-step. Her eyes widened, her lips parted slightly, and her hands gripped the pole tighter, as if afraid to lose something precious. "You already bought it? Where is it?" Hung nodded, gazing toward the fading horizon where the last rays of sunlight lingered. "About 3 kilometers from your house. The land's high open, faces 2 roads, water and electricity are ready. I thought maybe next year, after the rainy season, I'll build a small house there for you and the little one. Nothing fancy, just something solid and dry." She stood still, her breath catching. Then she lowered her gaze to the damp ground, where golden flecks of sunlight danced across the puddles. She didn't speak, her heart swelled with a jumble of emotions, joy, disbelief, and a deep, wordless warmth. Her hands trembled slightly on the bamboo pole, the strap pressing into her skin, painful but sweet. Hung reached into his pocket and carefully unfolded 2 papers, their edges slightly creased, but the ink still fresh. He handed them to her, his voice low but firm. "These are the sale papers and the land use certificate. I'll handle the transfer later. Consider it a gift for you and your son." Hoài Ca lifted her eyes, trembling. She stared at the papers in his hand as if they were something too precious, too unreal to touch. Her voice broke slightly. I've never had a piece of land of my own before. Thank you, truly." Hung smiled softly, the kind of smile that was quiet yet full of warmth. "No need to thank me. I just want you to feel safe, to stop worrying every time the wind rises, or watching for leaks in the roof whenever it rains." A gentle breeze swept by, carrying the scent of fresh beans from her baskets, mixed with faint wood smoke from distant kitchens. The sunset dipped low, casting a golden glow over the village road, draping the 2 figures standing side by side, a quiet man and a strong woman. They said nothing more. They simply looked at each other, silent in that fleeting piece of the fading day, as if everything that needed to be said was already understood in that single, lingering glance. By noon, the sun was high, spreading its golden light across the open fields. The air after the rain was astonishingly clear. Cool breezes drifted by, carrying the sweet scent of pomelo blossoms and the fresh aroma of newly turned earth. In the distance came the rhythmic sounds of farmers' hoes striking the soil, and the cheerful chirping of birds on the areca palms, the familiar music of the countryside after a storm. Hung and Hoài Ca walked side by side along the narrow path leading to the newly purchased land. Their shadows stretched long across the dry ground. Each step felt light but meaningful. Dew still clung to the grass by the roadside, sparkling under the sunlight. The breeze rustled through the pomelo trees, scattering their fragrance across the quiet space. Stopping in the middle of the open field, Hung squinted toward the horizon and pointed ahead. "From that pomelo tree there, across this corn row, all of this is ours now. If we raise the ground a little, by next year we can build a brick house. It's high enough, no more worrying about floods. His voice was deep and steady, but tinged with a quiet excitement, like a child finally seeing a long-held dream come true. Hoài Ca walked slowly along the edges of the land. The breeze lifted the hem of her blouse, and a few strands of hair brushed against her sun-kissed cheeks. She reached out to touch the rough bark of an old pomelo tree cool beneath her fingertips. Above her, the small green fruits swayed gently in the sunlight. Lifting her gaze, her eyes shimmered as she spoke softly, full of emotion. It's beautiful and so peaceful. If we plant a garden here, raise some chickens, grow vegetables, it would be perfect. Waking up to the sound of roosters, watching the plants grow day by day, that must be happiness. Hung looked at her, a slow smile spreading across his face, tender and reassuring. Yes. As long as we work together, I'll handle the house, you handle the garden, little by little, we'll build a real home. A place where you and Tony can live without fear when the rains return. At his words, Hoài Ca lowered her head, smiling faintly. Her lips trembled slightly as she spoke, her voice thick with emotion. As long as I can be with you and see Tony smile every day, that's enough for me. A soft breeze drifted by, carrying the scent of ripe pomelos and the whisper of rustling leaves. Hung stepped closer, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. His voice was calm, deep, filled with warmth and certainty. Congratulations, Hoài Ca. You finally have a piece of land that's truly your own. She looked up, her eyes bright with tears and joy, her smile glowing in the radiant sunlight like a sign of a new season arriving. Together they stood there, side by side on the wide open ground, surrounded by corn rows and pomelo trees swaying in the wind, silent witnesses to a new beginning, peaceful, hopeful, and full of promise after all the storms they had weathered. Evening slowly descended, and the last light of the day spread a warm golden glow across the ground. The calls of birds echoed from the hillside, blending with the gentle breeze that passed through the pomelo trees, the rows of erica palms, and through the tender dreams that were just beginning to take shape. Hoài Ca and Hung walked slowly along the narrow path, their hands intertwined, hearts filled with quiet hope. Behind them, the newly bought land shimmered under the sunset, a place where, before long, a small home would rise, where little Tony's laughter would fill the air each morning. A new chapter was beginning, one where love, trust, and protection would weave together into the simplest, yet most profound happiness, a home that was truly their own. Stay tuned for the next episode, when Hung begins laying the foundation for their dream house, and a mysterious stranger appears near the new property, carrying secrets that will change everything. And don't forget to leave a comment to wish Hoài Ca and Hung happiness. Because sometimes, true joy doesn't come from grand things, but from two ordinary people building, together, a small piece of land called peace.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Mình cài tóc lên đã. Quay đổi sang bên này xem nào. Hôm nay thì hiện tại thì mình đang edit video về nội dung của Ly Hoai Ca, thì hiện tại thì mình vẫn chưa có edit xong video. Bây giờ thì là mình đang xuất phụ đề á mọi người. Trời ơi bữa nay cái tóc của mình nó rụng thì thôi luôn đấy. Thì mọi người cũng có thể thấy là nó khá là dài, và mình cũng chuẩn bị mình đi mình cắt á. Đây nó dài và nó sơ khá là nhiều, thì để mình chuẩn bị sắp tới thì mình sẽ cắt bớt cái đuôi đi một tí cho nó đỡ chảy ngọn. Vì chắc là mình phải dùng thêm một số loại dưỡng tóc để nuôi dưỡng tóc. Tóc mình thì nó cũng không được đen lắm mà nó hơi hoe hoe vàng đó mọi người. Kiểu cái tóc gốc của mình nó không phải đen tuyền á.